Okay, so for something like this, what I want you to do this morning is to rebuild this geometry for me. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it, and you guys can do whatever you want. So let's look at this in terms of the shapes it's made from. Sorry, does everybody have it? So we've got the vessels here. We've got the aorta coming down here and splitting, and then we've got the renal arteries. So these things are just tubes, right? So we can model these using our kind of typical NURBS modeling tools, or any of our polygon modeling tools. So let's start with this. Again, whenever you model something, you want to have it mostly in the middle of the world. We're going to model the kidney out here, but generally speaking, the object is not placed out here. The whole thing is right here in the middle. So the first thing we want to do is not be able to move this thing around, right? So we can select this, and on a display layer, we can make a new one and put it on a display layer. And I'll call this something like ref model. And I'll save that. And if you'll remember, here in the display layers, we've got a visibility button, a P button, and that means something. And then we've got this other button, and it can either be T for template, and there you can see the internal shapes more clearly. And template you can't select, but it always stays in wireframe mode. Or you can click this once again and go to R mode, which is reference mode, which is in shaded mode, but it can't be selected anymore. I'm just going to delete my light in the background here. Yep, so do you want me to go through making a project again? Actually, might as well. So for doing any of these types of things, before you go too far, we can go to the project window. So you can set a project if you have an existing modeling project folder that you're using, but I don't have one, so I'll go to the project window. I'll go to new, edit, clear the settings, and I'll just do this on my desktop. It's not my computer, and I'll call this kidney model. And we only need a Maya folder. Oh, we'll probably need a source images folder for rendering later on, for images to light the scene, so we can use images to cast light in the scene to make more realistic lighting, and those will go in our source images folder that we call text. And then if we want to make any renders of the image, we'll go into Maya, we'll look for this folder called renders. So now if I do a save, it never finds the right spot the first time. And I'll just call this kidney model. I just navigated to my Maya folder within that project. And so if I do a change, let's just see if it knows where to go now. I'll just create a polygon plane, and I'll do a save, and yep, I went to the right spot. So you create a project or set a project. Sometimes the very first save you have to tell it where to go. And then from now on, if I were to open this project again in the future, I would open Maya, go to File, Set Project, navigate to the kidney model folder, set it, and then I can open from there, and it will take me to the right spot. Thanks for suggesting that's a good idea. Okay, so let's look at this a little bit. So we've got a long tube that bifurcates, we've got other tubes that grow out of it, and then we've got these lumpy things that we have to make. So the NURBS modeling tools will be good for the tube type shapes. And then I'll show one of two options you can take for doing the kidneys themselves. So if I want to draw a curve, it's usually best to do it in the orthographic views. And by usually, I mean always. So I'll just turn off my grid and go to Create, Curve Tools, CV Curve Tool. And then I'll just start drawing a curve here that's going to match this shape. So when you're doing CV Curve Tool, if you left click and then before you release, you can move where that point will go. So you have some chance to change it before you release. And I'm just doing enough to get the general shape here. And I'm going to follow down to this person's left. Left, is that right? Or is it right? Oh, I've forgotten all my anatomy. Oh no, are we looking at the back or the front? Nobody dares answer because we don't know. Oh, this must be the front here, right? So we've got these vessels coming off. So this is the anterior view. Is that right? Sure. All right. Let's look it up. Oh, that's terrible. Oh yeah, so it's the inferior mesenteric, and that's coming off the anterior side, right? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, and the left side here is higher. Okay, yeah, that's correct. Oh wait, did I say left? Yeah, is left. Okay, so you can see I've made my curve. It doesn't fit in this view, so now I've got to go in and tweak it. So remember, if you want to edit a curve, you can just select it like you select any other object, and then go into the right mouse button contextual menu and go to Control Vertex. And I can start dragging these into place. Now it might be useful to go into 4 mode, So there's another viewing option other than just wireframe or shaded mode. We can go into, I think it's called X-ray mode. So in this panel, under the shading menu, there's an X-ray mode, which just makes the shaded, it's still shaded, but it's somewhat transparent. So that's on a panel by panel setting. So here, X-ray. Unfortunately, there's no shortcut for it. Now I can't remember which one I'm following here. It's the one that goes. Yep, I think that's right. Oh no, it's this one. I'm just looking at the top view here to see which branch I'm following because it's hard to tell from the side view. I'll just go into X-ray mode here in the perspective view just to make sure everything looks good. So that's pretty good. So you really need references to model from. A mistake that people sometimes make is just to try and model by eye. There's a student working on a project last year, and she had to model a heart. And she just had pictures of it open and was trying to eyeball it, trying to model the shapes in, but there's no way to do that properly. So you want to bring in references like this. These 3D references are great, or image references, which we'll look at a little bit later on. So anyway, getting this kind of roughly into place. And now we want to actually generate geometry from this. So what tool do you think should we use for this? Now that we've got one curve, we want to make a tube. Remember? Extrude, right, yes. So again, remember there's polygon extrusion where you extrude a face, or there's extrude that sweeps one curve along another curve. That's the kind that we want to do here. So we need a second curve to do this, and so we'll just create a circle. So under the Create menu, under NURBS Primitives, there's a circle down here. And we can just create that. So this is a curve like any other. It's got a certain number of CVs. If I right click, I can see it's got 8 CVs here. It's a little hard to see. But it's got 8 purple dots around here. And we just want 4, treating it like a square sort of. So we still have history turned on for this thing. So with the circle selected under Make NURB Circle, in the channel box, we can change its number of sections here from 8 to 4. It won't change its look much. You can see it got a little less refined, but now it's just a 4 CV circle. And so remember that we're going to convert this to polygons, and we want this to be sort of a square tube in polygons. So it's good to use a 4-sided circle for this.
So, do you do that?
Yep. So if you select the circle, and then in the channel box you've got the transform node, the shape node, and then its history under inputs down here. So there's Make NURB Circle, and that is the command actually that we called to make the circle. And since history is still turned on, we can change the number of sections. We can change this to 24. And then if we look at this, it's got loads of little CVs now. And change it back to 4. If you wanted to change this after the fact, let's say you created the circle and it had, for some reason, 24 CVs, and then you deleted its history. So now if I select this and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, now that input is no longer there. It's gone now. So I can't easily just change that anymore. But there are still ways to do this. We can do something called rebuilding a curve. And so you do this a lot, and I may end up doing it for this curve up here too, and I'll show you in a minute. But right now, so this has all these CVs, which are no good to us. And so to fix this, under the Curves menu, right down almost at the very bottom, there's a rebuild function. And we can open this up. And we just want to change the number of spans. I think by default it will be 4. Yeah. So we just want to change this to 4. And so let's, actually I don't know how well this is going to work. We'll see. So the rebuild type, I think we can leave it uniform, so it's just going to try and keep the same distribution. Or if it was an uneven distribution of CVs in the past, it will try and distribute them uniformly. If you wanted to keep that uneven distribution, you could just reduce, and it would reduce the number, but it would keep their spacing. So parameter range, remember we talked about this last week briefly, that you measure the length of a curve in the value u, and so it has a value of 0 to 1 u from the beginning to the end of the curve. And we want to keep that as its parameter range from 0 to 1. Sometimes we could just say keep and it would stay that way because it already is that way, but sometimes you can get curves that have parameters outside of this. So just want to keep that and just change the number of spans. And the only type of degree curves we ever really use, I don't know what a 7-degree curve is, but a 1-degree curve is just straight lines from point to point with no interpolation that would curve the line between them. what a 2-degree curve is, I don't know. A 3-degree curve is a cubic curve, and it just gently interpolates between points, so you get curved segments between CVs. So we want to leave that as is. And rebuild. And if we check our CV count now, we can see that we're down to 4. So there is a way out of it if you've done that. And I'll delete the history on this now to get rid of that rebuild. I think rebuild is history. Oh no, it doesn't count as history. Anyway, I'm still going to delete history. I've got a history button, I guess. So now if we want to sweep this circle along this curve, we select the circle, then shift select the curve. So this is called the path, the long one, and the circle is called the profile. And we'll go into surfaces, extrude, and just open the options. So by default it will be this way. And most of the time when you're doing these extrudes, you're trying to make some kind of tube. And so the only thing really to remember is that these 4 things have to be turned on over here, nothing else. And if we want to convert it to polygons now, like we did last week, we can do that and choose our tessellation settings. So I'll do that. I'll just change it to quads and to control points. So wherever it's going to put a CV, it would put a vertex instead. There we go. Perfect. So it's a big square, right? Obviously, not too close to what we're trying to achieve. But if we hit 3 on the keyboard, of course, it will smooth it to the shape that we do want. So before when I was creating the curve that went along here, the path, if I select that curve now, and I'm going to turn on this viewing option up here that shows wireframe on shaded, so we can see the wireframe on this object here. Let me actually just hide our reference model for a second and turn off X-ray. So you can see the number of divisions going along here. If I select the path that we used to create this and rebuild it, just like we did with the circle, well, let's look at the attribute editor first for this. So we can see that we made this with 11 CVs, so it's got 11 spans. And so that is what's determining how many divisions we see going along this resulting tube. So if we rebuild this thing, go to Curves, Rebuild, and let's say we change this instead of 11, change it to 22 if we want to double a number, and apply this, you can see that the curve changed, but it also results in a change to the downstream geometry, which may be what we want. But the problem with doing this is that if we want to edit the shape of this, so there are way more points we have to move around. So I wouldn't do this until afterwards. So I'm going to undo out of this, because there's still a little tweaking that we have to do. I'm going to go into X-ray mode again. So now I'm just going to select some CVs and I'm going to start scaling these down to match. So if I go into scale mode, you can see it's scaling here. I can select the next one.
Where's X-ray mode?
In any panel, it's under the shading menu. Here, X-ray. So in any view, so I just turned it on here in the perspective view, but not the other views. So if we look at this now, you can see that the orientation of my manipulator for scaling is set to the object or the world. If you want to change that so it matches the orientation of the components that you have selected, if you hold down the button for scale, which is R, and then hold down your left mouse button, you'll get this contextual menu, and you can change it to orient itself to the world, to the object. In this case, we want to orient it to the components here. Now it's going to try and match the shape of the components. And so when you scale it down, it won't skew it. Again, so if I select some components, hold down our left mouse button, I'm holding them both down, so I can change from object to world to component into some other stuff. So this is where we just go in and tweak the model to get it to the shape that we want. And also we want to think about planning for these bifurcations or these offshoots to secondary vessels that are going to come off, and where they come off, and that we're going to need geometry in those places that we can extrude from. Any questions so far? Anything you want me to go over?
Can we go way back to editing that circle?
Sure.
I got lost in it.
Okay, yeah.
How would you change the number of, you made it 12 and I can't get down menu?
Okay, so let me just finish this little bit here. So I'm actually going to delete history on this piece of geometry, just so it won't be connected to that circle anymore. So I've got a button for it here, so that's deleted. So here's my little circle here. Oh, I actually deleted the history on this, so I'll create a new one. So to create a circle, create NURBS primitive circle, right? I'm just going to move it off to the side here. So if I right click and go to control vertex, we can see how many vertices we have here. We've got 8 going around. And if I right click again and go back to object mode, so when you've just created something, the only piece of history that it should have, well, it's got its transform node and its shape node, but then it's also got this history node under inputs here. So another way to view this is to look under Window Node Editor. And this is just to demonstrate. You don't need to do this to do this part. But if I select my NURBS circle and then map the input and output connections, you can see there's still a command here for make NURBS circle. So that's its construction history. And since we still have that construction history, it'll show up in the channel box under the transform and shape nodes under inputs here. So this is called make NURBS circle, and that's the command that we called when we asked it to create a NURBS circle for us. So if you just click on the name, it will open up some options here. And these are the same options that were available at the time of creation of the circle. So there's all this stuff. Forget about everything except for sections at the bottom here. And this indicates how many CVs there will be to construct the circle. So if we did something weird, like ask it to do 3, we'll probably get an error. Or, okay, we don't get an error. It actually makes it with 3. Oh, weird. Oh no, it actually makes it with 4. You can't have a curve without 4 points. So, but we can go in and just change this to the number of sections to 4. And if we right click, we can see that, yes, in fact, we do have 4 CVs. Is that okay? Did you see that on yours?
Kind of.
So I can see you don't have your channel box open, right? So on the right-hand side, there are these tabs. Yeah, so if you click on that, and that's the right place, so just type 4 in there and hit return. And so now, if you want to see the result of that, you can't see it in this mode because you don't see the CVs in object mode, right? But if you have the object selected, then right-click go to Control Vertex, then it shows you the CVs. Yeah. So that's the same with any object. Like if I go into polygons and create a torus, there's the transform node, its shape node, and then below here there's the create polytorus node, which still has those initial settings. So this is anything under this inputs title is its construction history. So if I do other things to it, like if I go to mesh and smooth, now you can see there's a new input under its construction history. If we scroll down, that creation node is also still there. So they get stacked on top of each other. In fact, they're not really stacked. If you look in the node editor and map this out, you can see there's the shape node, there's the smooth node, and then the original create node is attached to this.
When I open the node editor, I get that.
Yeah, so if you, let's say we select our torus here or whatever you've got selected, you select something, and then in the node editor up here at the top, and you'll see this in many menus in Maya or windows in Maya, is this thing called mapping the input and output connections. And if you click on that with something selected, it will bring that into the node editor. So it doesn't, even if you have something selected, when you open the node editor, it won't automatically show you the connections for that until you tell it to map it for you. So for example, if I go back out here and I select this tube that I just created, it doesn't actually show me this now until I map the input-output connections. It shows me the extruded surface shape and the extruded surface here. I deleted the history, so there's no creation on it anymore. So I'm going to name this. So I'm just going to show you one more thing, and then I'll let you guys build up these tubes. Then we'll go back and look at the kidney. Yeah? Right?
When I tried to rebuild the original line,
Yeah?
it deforms all of the scaling geometry that I did.
Yeah, I can see that happening. So imagine why that would be, right? So let's say you've got a curve made up of 8 points, right? And you generate an extruded surface from it, and it's got 8 sort of divisions along it. You go in and you scale those, and all of those vertices have a number. You don't see them, but they all have a number. And then if you go back and rebuild that curve, it's going to change the order of the numbers. So if vertex like 16 and 17, 18 and 19 formed one square that you scaled up or down before, now 16 may be up here and 17 may be here because you changed the order of the vertices. So sometimes changing construction history can result in undesirable and unpredictable things like that. So you would have to think that you'd probably want to do a different way to add more geometry to the extruded surface rather than changing the original curve.
Cut around there.
So you can cut around the edges if you wanted to do locally, but what I would probably do, what would I do? I don't know. I would probably just smooth it. So if we select this curve, and let's say I finished all of my tweaking to make it shape the way I want. One thing I'm looking at here is, so this is, I guess, the left renal artery here coming off. It's in a good position because it's right in the middle of this face here where I want to extrude from. But this face is way too big, right? So we really want to subdivide this here. So I could do that locally, like you say. I could go to insert edge loop by, with it selected, holding down shift and right mouse. And I could put an edge loop in here. But I may want to just generally smooth out the whole thing first, because all of these polygons are a little bit too long. So, what's the best way to do that? I don't know. Mesh. We can try it just by going to Mesh and Smooth and open up the option box and just reduce the division levels to 1 and see what happens. So that worked pretty well. That actually gave me pieces of the topology of the geometry is actually shaped pretty nicely for what I want here. So I'm looking at, around where this vessel comes off, I've got a polygon face I can extrude from that's a pretty good shape. Or I could actually extrude from these two faces if I wanted to. But I think I'll just extrude from one. So yeah, you can subdivide it by adding divisions. There are other ways to add divisions. You can add insert edge loops if you want to do it that way, if you want to do it locally. You can also do this thing called add divisions. I never use this, so I don't really know how it works, but let's try. So if I go to Edit Mesh, Add Divisions. So what I think this tries to do is it adds division without smoothing. So if I apply this, yeah, so you can see it's just subdivided all those faces. And if I get out of X-ray mode, you can see it's kind of angular looking, so it's subdivided without smoothing along those subdivisions. So let me just back up out of here, right back before I even did the smooth. So here's before the smooth. So let's look at the difference. Here's add division. So under Edit Mesh, Add Divisions, if I apply this, it subdivides, but it doesn't smooth. Okay, which could be useful if you want to keep the shape, but you need more geometry. But if we go to Mesh Smooth, which does something very similar, we'll just do one division level and apply this. It does the same amount of subdivision, but it actually averages the positions of those vertices to make a smooth-ish looking version. So that's kind of more what we want here. Okay, so let me just do one more vessel, and then you guys can do some of it on your own, since it's already 11:24. I'm just going to look in the top view, and I'll draw a curve for this vessel here. I'm going to delete the history on that thing. Well, I don't need to do that right now. But I'll draw a curve. Again, I'm using the top view because that's the best view for what we want here. I just want to go into X-ray mode. So I'm going right into the kidney here. Now you can see that it's actually sitting on the ground here. It's not at the right level, so I've got to grab it, sort of roughly move it up, and then go in, oops, and start to tweak, bless you, the points. Now here's another trick. For selecting points, there's a thing called pick walking. Instead of just going and selecting the next one, if I have this one selected, if I hit the left arrow key or right arrow key, I can jump back and forth. So it actually, if you're tweaking a lot, it's much more convenient just be able to switch this way. I'm going to go into X-ray mode here, so I can see where these are. I don't know which one I'm following. Maybe I'm following this one. Sometimes it's hard to find the vertices too, so just by using the pick walking, you can grab them more easily. And so in this mode, I'll check to see if I followed it correctly, and it looks like I did. And I'll just create another circle. And then shift select so the circle is selected, The path is selected. Surfaces, extrude, everything should be hunky-dory. There we go. Obviously too big, right? So I can just grab that circle, scale it down. And we can do it that way, right? Or, the way I would actually do it is I would just use this curve, and I'm going to hide my reference now, to extrude from this face. Still, I'm going to try and just move this up to the middle of the face. I'm cheating the anatomy a little bit here. Or if I wanted to extrude from a smaller face, then I could take Ruth's advice and go to insert an edge loop here, just so I have one smaller face to extrude from. But just only add geometry when you really need to. So if I select that face, shift select that curve. Let's try that again. Select this face, shift select this curve. And now this is the polygon type of extruding. So I'll just use my modeling toolkit here and click on extrude, add some divisions. Bob's your uncle. Got a new vessel. And so, again, I would only add enough geometry to get the shape and no more, because I'm going to smooth this, right? So we have a nice piece of geometry here. And if I don't like the interface, the way it comes off of the vessel, then I can start to tweak the shape a little bit. I can grab these points, move them up, and do whatever. I can insert another edge loop here to control the shape a little bit more. Okay, so for the rest of the morning till like 12:30 or so, I'd just like you guys to work on this and practice it, and I'll come around and help. And then in the afternoon, we'll look at modeling the kidney, but also using references for things like your surgical tools or other types of objects. But are there any questions you want to ask right now? Or do you want to go to the bathroom? I don't want to go to the bathroom. Okay, let's do that now. I have to go get a coffee before I die. And then we'll carry on. You guys can carry on.